Hello out there, this is Will with And You Films. We're going to share a visual effects highlight that was requested by YouTube commenter Anthony Siciliano, how we do our chest bursters in the Diary of a Wimpy Alien series. So here's our raw footage. You can hear Brendan cueing actors when to spasm and drop, but the bursters themselves are entirely visual effects. It's important to note that the actors aren't rotating too much. We purposely had them stay at the same angle to the camera as they collapse to simplify the visual effects process. That way we can match their angles with still photos of our Chestburster model. This little guy was made by our frequent collaborator John Mondelli, who also does all the animation for the Wimpy Alien series. It was a prop originally made for our first feature film Flashback, in which we executed a gutbuster effect that began with more practical onset elements. That's unfortunately a bit too time-consuming for us for these fast turnaround YouTube projects. So here, we'll take our still angle-matched photos into Adobe Photoshop, trace them with the pen tool to cut out the creature, and ultimately we end up with a single Photoshop file that includes all four of our busters, one for each of our actors. Now here we are in Adobe After Effects. This is the final effects sequence, so you'll see there are a lot of lighting effects that I can turn off. But ultimately, what we want is Bursters 1 Comp, which is the shot where poor Adam and Monica bite it. We'll focus on Adam's burster. The important layers here are the blood burst in front, the creature itself, the blood stain on his chest, and the original raw footage. So we'll focus on the raw footage first. The only thing applied to this is a motion tracker. You can access the motion tracker tool via Window, Tracker, which brings up this menu. And the tool you want here is Track Motion. You can see I've used it to track the dot of the eye on his Nicofine t-shirt, which it did shockingly cleanly. You can't always count on this tracking so smoothly. Often you need to add in a bit of manual frame-by-frame manipulation yourself. But hey, it worked out, didn't it? So, once that's in place, you can connect the motion data to another layer using this Edit Target button. I've tracked the data to this Null Object right here. A Null Object is exactly that. It's null, it's nothing. You can create them by right-clicking and choosing New, Null Object, and they make great invisible blank slates to hold motion data and other such things. So you can see ultimately, I've attached or parented my blood and chestburster layers to the null object to give them that motion data. You can see the result quite clearly with the blood stain turned on. There it is, following the eye. The only thing I've added to the blood stain here is a mask which removes a part of the stain when Adam's hand crosses over it. Masks are created with the pen tool, and this one is a subtraction mask. You can see if I turn it off, the blood stain which is supposed to be on his chest is suddenly on top of his hand as well, hence the need for the mask. Moving on to the burster itself, there's a number of things going on here. You can see it's got its own mask right here, dictating how much of the burster is visible at any given time. The mask path has keyframes on it, revealing more of the creature as it jumps out. The mask also has a hefty feather on it, which helps fade and blend the edge of the creature with what's behind it, in this case the bloodstain. It's a subtle thing, but without the feather, the edge is a bit too harsh. With it, we have a more seamless effect. Beneath the mask options here are the transform options, which give the layer its movement. In this case, it's a pretty simple position movement as it jumps out, and then a subtle Z rotation movement to make it wiggle a bit on its axis, this one right here, after it's appeared. This just adds an extra touch of realism to something that's essentially very cartoony. Also helping with that is After Effects' motion blur effect. Clicking on this box gives a layer motion blur, and clicking on this symbol lets us view the results in real time. You can see without motion blur, a fast-moving object looks too clear. With it turned on, he looks just a little more like he could have been photographed with the camera itself. Now the last thing done to the burster layer itself is probably the most subtle. If you watch closely as I click through the footage, you can see how the creature's mouth is actually opening and changing a bit. This is done with the Liquify effect tool. That's why this layer is actually its own composition. We can go in here to see what has been done to the still photo with the Liquify tool. There he is in his full glory, yuck. And you can see better here how his mouth changes. The Liquify tool uses a distortion mesh to blend your footage, in this case, just a still image. I've got keyframes on the mesh so that it ends up looking like the original photo, but begins all distorted and pinched in. I'll remove the effect for a tick so I can show you what the tool looks like. You place your ending keyframe, move earlier in the timeline, then go to your effect controls. Here you've got a number of tools that warp the footage. We're going to use the pucker tool that just pinches everything inward. You can alter brush size, pressure, and here's what it does. Ta-da! Just a pinch of movement on what would otherwise be a still image. And I'll revert back to my original work. This isn't absolutely necessary for the effect, of course, but the more layers of blending you can add in, the more the effect convinces the viewer not necessarily that it's real, but importantly that it's at least a piece with the style of the video being viewed. So back in my original Bursters comp, the last layer is the blood burst on top. We mostly use stock blood effects purchased from Video Copilot. It's an awesome site for really in-depth effects tutorials and stock elements like this one. Unlike the stain layer, which followed Adam down, this one is a faster, more violent burst on top of the creature element. Not too much has been done to it. There's a mask here once again to hide the parts that ought to be behind the foreground shoulder, and then there's some blurring and brightness effects which help it blend with the footage. So again, there's a lot of detail work here, but as long as you start with some footage, a couple blood elements, and an image of your creature, you can put the basic elements together relatively quickly. And then the rest is all massaging, blending, and layering to get you to the final result. You just keep tweaking things until you're happy with it. I hope you enjoyed this brief look behind the digital curtain. If you want us to keep doing tips like this one, please like, comment, and share like crazy. Views and interaction are really the only way we know that our content has an audience that wants to see it. And if you're really into everything we're doing here and want to help make it possible for us to continue and expand the content, please consider becoming a patron of And You Films for only $1 a month. Thanks for watching and have a truly spectacular day.